Right then, so where were we? Wow, it's been a spell. In my defence, I got distracted by other Cybermen expanded media, comics, short stories, and the occasional lovely drawing. Then Doctor Who was on, then Service to My Loyal Patrons, distinguished follower £1 a month, then Doctor Who was on again, and well, here we are. Back to your scheduled programming. Which more specifically is a small dot in a book, but one that represents a loose end along my journey across the great tapestry of Cybermen media. Obscure, perhaps. Intriguing, most certainly. Planet 14, as it turned out, was more of an elusive component to Cybermen lore than I feel it should have been. A problem that, as a picky chimp with an unhealthy desire to make all those jumbled pieces of the early Cybermen stories fit into a cohesive narrative that, in all fairness, doesn't really exist, I am already familiar with. Last year, I tried to make a video about the wheelie Cybermen from the Wheel in Space and where else in expanded Doctor Who media they might have also featured, and I got so desperate that I ended up talking about a Mr. Men book, which I may have misinterpreted as a subversive adult horror story. The reading age is 3 to 7.
Yes.
I'm still not convinced. So Planet 14 originally got its passing mention in 1968's The Invasion, where the cyber planner / controller / leader, whatever you want to call him, made this gloriously confusing statement.
The images of the two humans have been analyzed and registered. They are known and are hostile.
Hostile? How can that be? Have you been on Earth before?
No, they have been recognized on Planet 14. They are dangerous and must be destroyed.
Planet 14, but how?
When and how in the dickens this is meant to have happened is literally anybody's guess. Not only did this story mention a previously unheard of home base from the Cybermen, but also implied that the Doctor and Jamie had previously been there. And, well, that's news to us. Strange when they had a previous handful of Cybermen adventures they could have referenced instead, yet here we are. Undeterred by the prospect that further research into Planet 14 might prove fruitless, I thought I'd try and take a closer look anyway. And it turns out that Planet 14 had never really grounded itself in expanded media in the same way that Mondas and Telos did, probably because it was only mentioned in passing by the Cyber Planner and had not a single hint of visuals to back it up. Its most substantial coverage can of course be found in the Dense, the Mighty, the Codex Siberius, the Biblicus Chimpus, the Book of 1,000 YouTube videos, David Banks's Cybermen, and its audio adaptation, The Archive Tapes. This sacred Cyberman document proposes the Planet 14 theory, which postulates with steely resolve of a more hardline faction of Mondasian natives escaping their dying world of Mondas and settling on the distant Planet 14, a mysterious world on the outskirts of our solar system, where the Mondasian colonists proceed to undergo a more rigorous type of Cyberman conversion, thus establishing a seismic military force, all in the hope of invading planet Earth in the 70s and reuniting with their Mondasian cousins when they arrive on Earth's doorstep in 1986. It is without doubt a fantastic expansion that gives credence to the sporadic timeline of Cybermen in classic Doctor Who, and has been primarily and somewhat notoriously contested by this meddlesome Malcolm, Doctor Number 12, who, whilst sat on a chair in a state of merry abandonment during the opening scene of 2017's The Doctor Falls, claims that alongside Mondas, Telos, Earth and Marinus, that Planet 14 is simply another example of, say it with me kids, parallel evolution. In all seriousness, I do like the parallel evolution theory, aka where there's people, Cybermen will inevitably get started. I just don't like it as much as this. So, I hear you cry, tell us something you don't repeatedly tell us in every Cybermen video you make. chimp. Well, okay then. Let's talk about this mysterious world, too small to hold an atmosphere as described in the Cybermen book, but one which also held enough minerals, materials and a vital molten core to allow early cyberfaction to prosper. Does Planet 14 even have a story worth telling? Well, it's complicated. Behold a plethora of snippets and references, a wholly confusing implication in the Grant Morrison 1987 World Shapers comic, you know, that one where the Vord of Cybermen, that Marinus and Planet 14 are actually the same planet, with an additional twist at the end stating this planet is also... no, just no. I'm gonna save that for another video. I got a bone to pick with this comic. Also, a highly notable reference to Planet 14 as found in 1993's New Adventures novel Iceberg, which, like the World Shapers comic, is an enigma of its own. For one thing, one of the book's characters says the following. Now there's some dialogue Capaldi could sink his teeth into. But more crucially, the Cybermen lore in this novel slots in with industry precision with the David Banks timeline, largely because it was written by that very same man. Iceberg tells of a brand new Cybermen story set in the deep, deep future of 2006. And it serves as something of an honorary follow-up to the invasion, in that one of the cyber ships, presumably after Zoe's missile attack, crash lands in the South Pole, where it then hides in a base beneath the ice. As the years pass by, it manages to utilise Mondasian technology left after the canonical 1986 destruction of Mondas, meaning the notion that different strengths and weaknesses attributed to different types of Cybermen is also addressed, meaning in turn that this is one of the few stories that clearly recognises that different types of Cybermen were, well, different types of Cybermen, including those from Planet 14. Full disclosure, I'm reading up on Iceberg using websites such as Fandom and the Whoniverse.net discontinuity guide, because old Doctor Who media can be rare and pricey, and the same goes for this novel written by Steve Lyons and published in 1996. Killing Ground is a 6th Doctor Cybermen story which operates with perfect thematic synergy with the David Banks timeline, and goes into further expanded detail on the Archivists, the fictional entities responsible for documenting the Cybermen timeline heard in the archive tapes and read in this book. The Cybermen depicted here are actually cyber nomads as seen in Revenge of the Cybermen, and just like that, we're off topic. Planet 14. What about Planet 14? This world with a name but no identity, no history, no visuals to substantiate its existence, a void in the narrative cosmos, made tangible only as a stepping stone for a more substantial threat. Tell you who did do alright for himself, this flesh and bone non-cybernetic mark, Tobias Vaughn. Remember when you watched this scene in The Invasion for the first time and you thought to yourself, haha, look at him just hanging there while he transmits his consciousness via satellite into one of 14 identical robot copies of himself? No? Well, okay. But you might have been thinking that if you'd read this 1995 New Adventures novel Original Sin. Not the audio adaptation, because due to copyright reasons, Vaughn's character isn't specifically acknowledged as Tobias Vaughn, even though it was blatantly him. In the book, however, one of these robot Vaughns plays a would-be saviour of Earth in all kinds of canon-smashing ways, and Tobias Vaughn would feature again in Gary Russell's Scales of Injustice, which has pretty much nought to do with Cybermen. Instead, he's faffing about with Silurians. You stay out of this, Alan Barnes, and yep, again, this needs a video of its own. I mean, this is a follow-up from The Invasion of sorts, right? For one of the characters at least. But what about our main heroes? The Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. Well, we know full well what happens next to them, and I already covered it in detail on my channel. So that's the end of that. Following the invasion, they pay a visit to the planet Gond. Except, and this, my little starry-eyed underlings, is where the story gets interesting. I can't do this. I just can't. I'm talking about this like there's no really annoying caveat turning up. It's just too much. I can't cope. In January 2016, Big Finish released a Cybermen story written, directed and starring the undisputed don of all things Cybermen who isn't David Banks, Nicholas Briggs. It sees the return of Wendy Padbury reprising her role as everyone's favourite torturer of primitive computers, Zoe, and Fraser Hines playing not just Jamie McCrimmon but also Patrick Troughton's Doctor Who. As hard as it might be for you guys, I encourage you to respectfully put the Crotons to one side for a brief interim, because canonically this is the Doctor Who adventure which immediately follows the invasion, and it is positively brimming with Cyberman goodness. Behold the ISOS Network. The ISOS Network is much more of an invasion follow-up, and you know what? It's pretty darn good. In a happy-go-lucky caper sort of way, as opposed to the gritty clout of stories like Spare Parts, and very much plays into the strengths of what Trouters, McScruffy Pants, Cheeky Chops and Squeaks do the best, running around, getting into scrapes and making new friends along the way. It is most certainly wonderful to have the old gang back, with Fraser taking the reins and playing his Doctor in the same way the late great William Russell, rest in peace you absolute legend, also played William Hartnell's Doctor Who for Big Finish. Though I found Fraser's tone a little too scratchy to be mistaken for the real thing at points, Hines's vocal mannerisms are fully on the money, and it wasn't long before I was hearing the voice and seeing the second Doctor himself. Besides, who am I to criticise when my William Hartnell impression sounds like this? Goodness me! Goodness me! Mr. Roderick! I must be back in the planet Haximos! Indeed you are. Wendy Padbury and Fraser Hines take turns in narrating the audio drama, and they really seem to put their hearts into it. It's also got some cool music and super authentic cyber vocals courtesy of Briggs himself. All the trinkets needed for a wholesome audio Doctor Who adventure. After saying goodbye to Unit and friends on a random field at the end of Invasion, the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe leave planet Earth in the TARDIS, observing the destroyed cyber fleet along the way. However, it appears that there is still one active cyber ship remaining, and whilst attempting to pursue this ship, the TARDIS is caught in a warp distortion field, causing them to land on a planet of golden grass and ancient stone walls. This is the planet Isos 2. It is here that they find a sleek, elegant city, too beautiful to be made by Cybermen. Whilst it was definitely at one time occupied by humans, the only life they find on the surface are slugs, and lots of them. And we're not talking about the type of slug that enjoys feasting on a tender, succulent space racist. The main bulk of the story is set in a disused underground monorail system, where a straddling group of invasion Cybermen, aka the early Cyber Faction, they're not called that in this, display a keen interest in getting the monorail active, while the slugs keep messing it up and covering everything in slime and slug eggs. When the Isos ship Braxos and its captain Cero arrive, it is revealed that Isos 2 was a colony world, except all the colonists disappeared 5 years ago. Jamie also finds a chamber full of empty cyber containers, just like the ones in Vaughn's factory. No! And the very same cyber ship which flees away from Earth at the beginning of this story. There is some really cool Cybermen action in this story, with all the authentic trinkets of the 1968 invasion Cybermen and plenty of human soldiers for them to massacre. More noteworthy, however, is the Slug versus Cybermen action. These big slimy beasties find no end of enjoyment in throwing Cybermen about the place, and also ripping off their chest units, causing them to bleed that same white goo that the Cyber Telosians do in the Tomb of the Cybermen. Speaking of which, and here's where the story gets really sexy, the straddling survivors of the Earth invasion fleet are preparing to resurrect a three-piece Cybermen squad of an entirely different kind, with two of them described as having simpler, sleeker head designs, and the central figure, well, how did I miss this when I was making my Telos videos? A fully functional and distinct Telosian cyber controller. These guys are so authentic that they even come in their own plastic wrappers, just like in Tomb. Even though it's never revealed where these unmistakably Telosian inspired designs came from, it is awesome having a story where two different types of Cybermen come together. Something of a rarity, I think you'll find. And the voice of the Telosian controller is sublime, a wonderful juxtapose to the more generic Cybermen voice of these guys.
Travel pod now activated and on course. Increase speed to maximum thrust.
Beautiful. There are just these marvellous moments, such as the exchange of data between the cyber leader and cyber controller, represented by that classic ripple of electricity. Just to add a couple more mushrooms to your omelette, there is even a small reference to Hartnell's Doctor, standing in defiance to the Mondasians as seen in 10th Planet.
One flash showed a different Doctor, an old man with long silver hair, challenging the Cybermen.
The Doctor is recognised. And in another rare moment of acknowledgement that all the Cybermen in the classic adventures do look different, you get this brilliantly tight bit of dialogue between Jamie and the Doctor.
And there he is, waiting to meet us. How kind. Aye, I remember him all right. We met him on Telos in the tombs. Oh, one remarkably like him. I remember Jamie. That was in the future. Oh, I suppose so, but...
You clever little audiobook. A bit of scripting just open-minded enough to let you fill in the gaps yourself. Good job, Nicholas Briggs. How could you do this to me? These could somehow be connected to the Cybermen we saw on the moon base, which canonically is set after this adventure, with this particular cyber controller seen here in collabs with the early cyber faction to kickstart their own planned invasion in the future. Just a thought, in the ISOS network the Cybermen use the monorail network to supercharge a giant bomb. Its destination, Earth. Meanwhile, the resident ISOS military prepare to attack the Cybermen, giving these silver villains all the juicy convertible humans they need for a brand new invasion force. Fortunately, the giant slugs, sentient in their own right, smash the socks off the Cybermen, ripping off chest units and flinging these Cybermen in the air. It's an embarrassing riot. The story concludes with the cyber controller defeated and supposedly destroyed, and the entire colony city on ISOS 2 being level to the ground. Might be the reason why these guys don't have a controller of their own. Just a thought. My final conclusion is that the ISOS network is a charming escapade, engineered very much in the spirit of the Patrick Troughton era, with frills, spills and all the Cybermen excitement a Doctor Who fan could possibly want, and an almost fully worthy follow-up to The Invasion. And it's also the story that ruins everything. I forgot to tell you about Hilsey, didn't I? The ISOS 2 colony native who befriends Zoe and is described as having the halfway converted treatment, as also seen with the likes of Lytton, Danny Pink and that woman in Torchwood. Hilsey explains how they were once a thriving human colony until the Cybermen converted the colonists 5 years ago. And this revelation segues into a couple of conversations that the Doctor has with Captain Sero, and words honestly escape me. With a level of casual merry abandonment that even Parallel Percy would shake his head at, the Doctor says this.
I think it's highly likely that your colonists were turned into the Cybermen who attempted to invade Earth.
And in case you didn't catch that, here it is again.
Indeed. Aye, but I saw thousands of those Cybermen containers, like the ones we saw in Vaughn's factory back on Earth, but they were all empty. Empty, I see.
This seems to support your theory, Doctor, that everyone in the colony was converted into Cybermen to create a force to invade your Earth.
A glaring, unignorable, outright high-handed declaration of being just wrong, which states that Isos 2 was the home planet of this invading army. And the colonists of Isos 2 are these Cybermen. Just how? No reference to Planet 14, which is mentioned in the story that this is supposed to be a sequel to. Did Nicholas Briggs not know? The undisputed Don of Cybermen who isn't David Banks? Just because Planet 14 had no real substantial lore doesn't mean you hand its history willy-nilly into the first colony that comes into your head. And also this, and him. This isn't even a slight lapse in continuity, this is continuity folded up in a tissue and flushed down the toilet. And yes, I have considered the possibility that Planet 14 and Isos 2 might be the same world with different names. But even if you discredit the David Banks timeline completely, it still doesn't make sense because humans didn't have colonies on other worlds in the 60s or 70s or wherever the hell this was set. I give up. So, Big Finish released another Cybermen story in 2022, and in this one, Eccleston says to not believe any of the Cybermen origin stories, particularly that of Planet 14. And I don't blame him. On the one hand, I think that's quite a good idea. On the other hand, I think, why should I?
Sit down, Ash.
At least there are a loyal group of storytellers whose ideas and theories and respect for basic continuity is credible. You lot, I mean it. Over the years, I have read some very passionate and imaginative theories on how to explain various facets of Cybermen lore, so I'd like you to do that now. Cannon the trousers off this and tell me how it can be explained that Isos and Planet 2 are apparently one and the same, or not. And you might be saying, well, chimp, you do that. It's your video. Why can't you do it, chimp? Well, here's why. It's just exhausted me. I don't know. You know the old expression, but too many threads, not enough tank tops. That is an expression, isn't it? So how about we neaten up this journey the only way we can, with some resolution. After all, no self-respecting planet occupied by Cybermen lives to tell the tale, right? What happened to Planet 14? Well, for that, we need to go back a little further. March 1998 saw the publication by BBC Books of a collection of short Doctor Who stories, titled Short Trips. It featured a gathering of upcoming and established authors, all banded together to create a novel showcasing adventures from each Doctor numbering 1 to 8. But what I'm interested in is its 1999 follow-up, More Short Trips. For it is here, distinguished followers, that we have a definitive endpoint for Planet 14. Scientific advisor by Ian Atkins is, yep, I'm gonna say it one more time, something of an enigma. At just 20 pages, it sees the second Doctor providing technical advice on the set of a movie which attempts to retell the Cybermen's near conquest of Earth, as seen in The Invasion. However, the movie's director is being fed little more than mistruths by the Doctor, as the Doctor and the Brigadier are driven to completely sabotage the credibility of this film. On set, the Doctor provides false information on the Cybermen's method of invasion in real life. Why is the Doctor doing it, you may ask? Because Kate, the director's young daughter, has an implant in her brain, put there by a cyber infiltration unit. Using this girl as an unwitting spy, this infiltration unit intends to gather as much information on the failed invasion as possible, presumably to make sure the next one goes right. Hence the reason why the Doctor is feeding it all the gobbledygook that comes into his head. The story itself jumps between three main narratives, One set around the activities of the Doctor, a second set from the perspective of the infiltration unit's computer, recalibrating its databanks based on the fake news given by the Doctor, and the third and most crucial perspective for us the reader is from Kate herself, whose memories are intertwined at a confusing molecular level with that of the cyber unit that fled its home planet in a struggle for survival. And it is from this perspective that, in one short paragraph, we get a first-hand account of Planet 14's final moments. That's more like it. Proof after all that Planet 14 is worthy of the same legacy of bigger, bolder worlds which had Cybermen but are now destroyed. Worlds such as Mondas and Telos, oh, for goodness sake. It seems my work is never done. Speaking of which, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, why not head over to patreon.com/chosenchimp, where you can become a distinguished follower for just £1 a month. It is there that you can hit me up in the DMs and request any Doctor Who topic that you would like me to talk about. Classic Doctor Who stories are an absolute blast for me to talk about, but really anything that you want to talk about Doctor Who related, hit me up and I will produce the video. It makes this channel a bigger, smarter, better, stronger place. So thank you for your contribution, and I hope you guys are having a great existence. I guess it's revenge next. Have a good one.